On 10:30 we'll make a start. Seeing as this is the first committee meeting of 2018, Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you. Welcome everyone. Could I ask you to make sure that your mobile phones are either switched off or put on to airplane mode. Thank you. I would also like to say, on behalf of the Planning Committee, I would like to express our deepest sympathy and sincere condolences to our colleague, Councillor Maitland, and her family, and our thoughts are with them during this difficult time. David's just going to say something about this planning meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Just for members' information and any members of the public who've come along, Item 5, which is for land adjacent to Craigbrex at Barnbarroch, Kippford, the application has been withdrawn and therefore will not be considered at today's meeting. So if anybody has come along for that one, then it will not be considered today.
Thank you, David. I'll now ask Nick to confirm the Sederunt.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillors Dempster, for lateness from Councillor Doogie Campbell, apologies from Councillor Ian Crothers, Andy Ferguson, Patsy Gilroy, Ivor Hislop, Jane Maitland and Ronnie Tate, and we have 11 members present at the start of the meeting and 8 apologies.
Good, apologies for John Martin, please. Somebody put the diesel pump in the wrong place this morning. They put petrol on his car.
Thank you, Nick. Is there any declarations of interest? Andrew?
Thanks, Chair. I've got an interest in item 4. I've got family members who have objected, and I've actually shown support in my campaign for the development of that site, so I'll absent myself from the room.
Any other declarations of interest? No? Right, could we confirm the minutes of the previous meeting and agree the amendments? Thank you. I'll now ask Nick to outline the procedures to be followed.
Thank you, Chair. The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be permitted to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and such members should withdraw from the Chamber after making their presentation, and applicants or their agents. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order, and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of the proceedings. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you're in danger of exceeding your allotted time. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please don't repeat what is in the report, as you can be assured members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application or, where appropriate, agree a recommendation to be made to full council, who will determine the application.
Thank you, Nick. We will now go to agenda number 4, which is the former Garrick Hospital, Edinburgh Road, Stranraer. Planning application for erection of a block of 6 flats with associated offices and common rooms, 12 support flats and 6 adapted bungalows. Formation of new access, communal parking areas and associated landscaping. Planning number 17/1506/4. And here to give his presentation is Chris Mattia.
Thank you very much, Chair. The application is in front of members today because we've received 6 or more individual representations to the application. We've received 24 in total. They're outlined in the report and we'll cover them just a little later. Application site, as you can see from the location plan, is the former Garrick Hospital site in Stranraer. As you can see, it's adjacent to Edinburgh Road, the A77. It's in the LDP as a designated housing site. It's designated as STR H5, and there is a single vehicular access from Edinburgh Road into the site itself. Just going through some photos of the site just now. The site was cleared some years ago, as you can see from the vegetation growth, and it's currently surrounded by Harris fencing. This is the west of the site, from the sort of rear gardens of Dalrymple Street, looking back across to the properties on Edinburgh Road. This probably gives a better representation of how long the site's been lying as a brownfield site. You can see from the vegetation there. So that's looking across the site from west to east towards the houses on Clennock Street, which forms the eastern boundary to the site. Back to Edinburgh Road. Some detail left from the original hospital. You can see the wall and the fence there. Kind of going ahead slightly, you can see there's quite a few parked cars round about there, and parking and access to the site is one of the kind of key considerations that we have, but we'll cover that just a little later as well. Moving further down Edinburgh Road towards the top of Clennock Street. And that's Clennock Street itself, so you can see it's very narrow, and there's double yellow lines down one side. It's looking back up Clennock Street to the junction of Edinburgh Road. Now, turning to the site layout itself, you can see the site is there's sort of 5 distinct blocks of development. Within they have sort of various different end users in mind. That's outlined on page 10 of your committee report. Block 1, which we can see the elevational detail for here. This is the one to the front of the site, so elevation number 1 at the top, the south elevation there, is the one that's going to be facing onto Edinburgh Road, with the site access just to the right of the block there. This is a training facility for young people aged 18 to 25. And there's 6 flats with various offices and common rooms in there, and the flats will take up to 12 young people in there. Block 2, which is the block to the rear of that one, to the north of the site. This is the main block, and this will contain 12 flats, and this is for people with varying degrees of dementia, to allow the residents to live independently while still accessing care support packages. Blocks 3 and 4 are wheelchair adapted bungalows, both more or less the same in terms of the detail of the layout. These ones are sited along the eastern boundary of the site, facing into Clennock Street, and are 4 semi-detached bungalows. Block 5, which is to the right of Block 1, will also face on to Edinburgh Road. These are extra care bungalows, and they are for people with severe physical or mental health disabilities. I'm going to go back through some of the slides just in a wee second, but the development overall is it's not an affordable housing development in the traditional sense. It's more a supported accommodation. Within the site itself was allocated in the LDP, and members should also note that the development has been agreed as a strategic priority through the council's strategic housing investment plan as well. So the principle of development on the site is fairly well established, and as you can see from the photographs, it's pretty much a brownfield site as it stands just now. The LDP site guidance that we have for the site is on page 14 of your committee papers at 4.6, and aside from the notion that it's the site's to be used for a residential use, access into the site should be taken from Edinburgh Road, and off-street parking would be required within the site, or parking to be provided within the curtilage of each individual property. We have a single point of access from Edinburgh Road into the site, but I'm going to go back just very quickly to the site layout. I'll go back and we'll have a look. We saw the photos from Clennock Street as well. So as you can see, blocks 3 and 4, they originally had vehicular access onto Clennock Street. This kind of covered part of, there was 2 issues surrounding access and transport into the site. So the design was amended to remove the driveway access from the 4 bungalows along Clennock Street, just so there's a single point of access. There were some issues with the access raised there, given the narrow aspect of Clennock Street and the fact that there was double yellow lines running down one side, so parking was only available down one side of the street, so there would have been a loss of on-street parking with that one. Kind of going back to the photographs that you can see there, parking in the surrounding area has been a bit of a problem over the years since the closure of the hospital, and it is recognised that there will be a loss of an informal parking arrangement that's been in place since the hospital closed. But given the fact the site is in the LDP and it was to be identified as a residential use, this probably wouldn't have been something that would be able to be used as an indefinite arrangement with that. So overall, the scheme is compliant with policies in the LDP, and for reasons outlined in the report, it's recommended for approval subject to the conditions listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Has any members got any questions on Chris's presentation? Okay. Could I ask Graham Robertson to come and put his presentation as the applicant for Lorburn Housing Association? I will give you 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got about 30 seconds left of your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. To be honest with you, I'm not going to speak for too long. I just want to go over a couple of points that, Chris has covered pretty well the detail of the application and how we took on board a lot of the concerns of the local residents, and we resubmitted some different plans to take those concerns on board with regards to parking, certainly in Clennock Street and the width of Clennock Street. So we removed all the parking all the parking was accessed from that narrow street. Just to emphasise as well, this is a £4 million plus investment in the town of Stranraer. want to bring back to life a brownfield site right in the town centre. We're looking also to build here the first foyer building in Dumfries and Galloway, and only the second foyer supported accommodation for young people in Scotland. So it's an exciting project, not only providing opportunities for employment during the construction phase, but also employment opportunities we hope for young people coming through the foyer experience after that. And that's pretty much me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Has any members got any questions? Archie?
Thanks, Mr. Robertson. You talk about supported accommodation and potential for employment opportunities with young people and obviously those that are disabled as well with access issues. And I'm just wondering what do you mean by that? What sort of employment opportunities may come along with that?
The idea is obviously a multi-generational facility, as in there's a huge shortage in the Stranraer area of, a lot of the care providers have problems in recruiting people into care provision. And one of the things we'll be looking at is providing training for young people that are interested in perhaps a career in the care environment. So that's the kind of ethos behind what we're trying to do here.
Katie was first, John. I'll take Katie, then John.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, what do you mean by a foyer building? Can you just explain what that is, please?
A foyer, I think it's actually came from, it's almost like a French model it's for young people that between 16 and 25 that potentially have maybe issues at home, that they want to give them an opportunity to, go into the first sort of their own flat and give them the chance to live independently, and provide them with the support for that, but also give them employment opportunities and training opportunities to go along with that. So that's the kind of the idea behind the foyer, and it comes with the 6 flats, and it's also got the facilities to provide training. There's meeting rooms, there's sort of office space. So that's pretty much I hope that answers your question.
Okay, John.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Robertson, a lot of the residents in blocks 3, 4 and 5 may require wheelchair-adapted vehicles. Now, to access these vehicles, you have ramps, etc. Is there sufficient space for a number of wheelchair-adapted vehicles to park in this facility?
We do have a charging area for mobility vehicles on the site. I'll probably actually say for handing over to the architect here, if that's okay, for Mark Buchanan, for Meakin Turnbull to answer that particular.
Yeah. Chris, could you go back to the site plan for me, thanks? You maybe can't see very well, but there are 6 disabled spaces designated within the development. You see, Chris is pointing them out up there. There's dotted throughout, so there are designated disabled spaces over the access either side. Access to blocks 3 and 4 are ramped from the rear, so they can get straight out those mobility spaces into the property. And as Graham says, we do have a mobility storage charging building associated with block 2 as well, so that if they can get around without needing cars as well.
You want to come back in, John?
Yes, thank you for that. I'm just aware, when you have ramps, etc., you do need space allocated so the vehicles aren't parked close together. How many parking spaces in total are there in this facility?
37, I think it ended up in the end. We had lengthy discussions with Roads about it to get to what number they were looking for, and then the proportion of that had to be disabled spaces from that.
It's in your papers there, John, at page 11, paragraph C. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Mr Robertson, I have no difficulty with the low-rise bungalow-style development, but do you feel that blocks 1 and 2 are compatible with housing in the surrounding area? If we could go back to the slide, it might be helpful.
I think if you look at the existing houses, certainly on Edinburgh Road, there's fairly substantial bed and breakfast type buildings on Edinburgh Road overlooking the site. So certainly going up to the 2 stories we have across the road, and what was there previously with the Garrick Hospital. I think, the scale, whatever, is in keeping with, what was there historically and what is there at the moment.
I was thinking more in terms of the design as well as the scale.
As in being 2-storey with what we're, well, certainly for the supported accommodation, block 2 would put a lift in for that. It would there'll be a lift contained within the building to facilitate people with mobility issues getting up and down from ground to first floor. And in terms of being able to fit what we can in the foyer building, as in 6 self-contained flats plus all the other facilities that we need for that building, it really needs to be over the 2 stories.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Well, thank you, Graham. If you please take your seat. Members are now in session. Archie.
Thank you very much. I see this as a very exciting new opportunity in Stranraer for employment for young people, and also supported accommodation and opportunities for training for them as well. I also see it as a great way of dealing with those that are disabled either physically or mentally, and it fits well with the policies that we have and the strategic housing improvement plan. For that reason, I would suggest that we go with the recommendations as suggested in the report, Chair.
Thank you, Elaine.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Chair. Like Archie, I think this is a very exciting development. If there are not planning reasons not to let it go ahead, I think it should go ahead. We heard about the foyer development, which I think there has been one in, I think it was Aberdeen at one. There's been a foyer before. They've been talked about for 20 years, but we've never really progressed them in Scotland. So this is an opportunity for Dumfries and Galloway to be at the forefront of that type of activity. I think also with the sort of dementia village idea, a lot of older people with dementia are unable to continue to live at home because the properties and general use housing is not suitable, and they're not able to be adapted to help for them to be able to live independently as long as possible. So on the basis that there are no good planning reasons not to go forward with this, I would actually welcome this development.
Thank you, Elaine. If there's any more questions, okay, we'll just move to the recommendations. Agreed? Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 6, which is the Cairnsmore of Carsphairn, 5.5 kilometres north-east of Carsphairn. A planning application for siting of a trailer-mounted 7-metre-high radio mast, a 6-metre-high wind turbine and solar panel, and associated concrete block ground anchor points, and this is retrospective, temporary until June 2018. Planning number 17/1730/4, and here to give his presentation is Bill Murray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is an application for planning permission for a temporary radio mast and associated development on the summit of Cairnsmore of Carsphairn. Before I take you through the slides, just to make it clear that exceptionally in this instance, I have not done a site visit. So the slides are slides that have been provided by representatives and the applicants. I would have been delighted to do a site visit, but I was instructed not to. The council couldn't provide the appropriate transport for me. Is this working? Is it this one? All right. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so this is the location plan. The site's in a remote area, approximately 5.5 kilometres north-east of Carsphairn. This is an aerial photograph of the summit. This is a closer view, aerial view of the summit. You can just about make out the cairns in that view, or one of the cairns. This is the first of the images provided by a representative showing a general view of the summit with the informal cairns as mentioned in the report, and you'll see the development on the right there. This is a close view of the concrete anchor blocks that were added at a later stage. Initially, the guy wires were anchored by loose stones that had been collected by the developer across the summit and used as anchor points. They were subsequently replaced by these blocks. That's a general view of the summit, again showing the whole of the development. You can see the two masts, the solar panel on the trailer, the guy wires and the concrete anchor blocks. This is a view of the summit, not showing the development as it would be before development and again after removal. So these are now the drawings and images submitted with the application. This is the location plan. This is the plan elevation and images of the mast, plan view in the bottom left-hand corner, elevation in the top right-hand corner, and a selection of images. I have extracted these images to try and show them slightly enlarged in the following photographs. So that is the solar panel and the two masts on the summit as submitted with the application. Similarly, this is another view of the summit with the development as submitted with the application. And this image shows the stones that were used to anchor the guy wires, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, before the concrete blocks were used to replace them. So the recommendation is to grant temporary planning permission until the end of June. Approval will be subject to conditions requiring removal and reinstatement of the summit and the cairns, and that would be carried out in consultation with the council archaeologist.
Thank you very much. Members got any questions for the presentation? Archie?
I see this as a retrospective planning application, and it kind of worries me that you know that developers have done this type of thing before, and we have said at previous committees that retrospective planning is something that we don't take lightly to. I'm just wondering how long it's actually been up there. If the retrospective planning application puts through till June 2008, normally these masts are up for 2 or 3 years. Just wondering how long it's been there, Bill.
Paragraph 1 and 2 of the report in the background section covers that point. I spoke to the applicants and I understand from them that it was originally placed on the site around February 2016.
Jeff?
Back here, it was February 2016. Why is it taking so long to get here?
David will answer this.
As I'm sure the representatives will allude to in their presentation, we had a protracted level of conversation about this one as to whether or not it was development. The initial scheme, I took the view that it was de minimis in the context of a hillside because they hadn't fixed it down with the concrete blocks. We also had a difficulty as well in that we could not track down who the actual developer was. All the wind farm developers in the area denied all knowledge of it. So we kind of drew a blank on it, so we couldn't actually pursue it even if we'd wanted to. Once I got the further photos from the representatives showing that they'd now imported these large concrete blocks, then I took the view that that had shifted it and just tipped the balance of actually being development. I would add that the developers themselves still contest this is development at all, but notwithstanding that, they have submitted a retrospective application for it. So it did take a period of time before A, we could track down who the developer was, and B, we actually got an application submitted.
Is that okay, Archie? Jeff, please.
No, David's just answered the question I was going to ask.
Okay. Any other questions on the presentation? Could I ask David Barnford to come forward? I will give you 3 minutes for your representation, and I'll let you know when there's 30 seconds to go.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Can I firstly highly recommend a site visit that whenever you would choose to go to Cairnsmore. It is a lovely walk. Sadly, it's just been spoiled by what you've seen on the photographs. And I would confirm the gist of what Mr. Sutty has said about the background leading up to the application. When I first came across this, I did think it was certainly a material development requiring planning permission, but there was a dialogue, and we are now where we are. So I'm very pleased to see the application lodged. I'm pleased to say I'm still fit and able to stravage around the hills and glens of Scotland, D&G and further afield. There is still much to be enjoyed in the Scottish countryside, but I have to say that I'm regularly dismayed and disappointed by the encroachment I continue to see, mainly from large-scale industrial developments in the countryside. And of course it falls to committees such as this to control and manage these things in the wider public interest. In this particular case, we came across the development some time ago, and I took the view straight away that it had an adverse impact on the character and amenity and the landscape interest, and indeed on the archaeology. On the summit, on the archaeological side, it was because the cairns up there had obviously been mined by the developer to stabilise the steel angle iron pins that they'd used to attach the guy ropes to. Now the report does deal with that and points out that restoration is anticipated, and that I would welcome. I do think the development is quite alien up on the plateau of Cairnsmore of Carsphairn. I do think it has an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the plateau, and that is acknowledged in the report. Having said that,
you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I do take comfort from the comment in the report that the officer agrees with the gist of our representations. That's in paragraph 4.12. The weightings that the case officer has applied lead to a favourable recommendation. I invite the committee to rebalance these weightings in favour of the landscape up there. It is a regional scenic area, and in doing that, I would invite the committee to refuse the application on adverse landscape impact grounds.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Has members got any questions for Mr. Barnford? Joe?
Mr. Barnford, is it your view that stones have been taken off that cairn to pin down the trailer?
Yes, Chair. When we first saw it, we were clearly of the view that the cairns had been mined to basically pile groups of stones around the steel pins to which the original guys had been fixed. And there's a recognition in the report that that matter needs to be restored.
If you didn't mind, Chair, I think that highlights people doing things on their own, then retrospective applications. The damage they can do prior to any application coming in is totally unacceptable. And I think we need to address these issues somehow, but I don't know how. Thanks very much, Mr. Bondwood.
Yeah, I think you've got to remember that this application is temporary and it's only until June, so point taken. Any other members with questions for Mr. Bamford? No? Thank you, Mr. Bamford. If you take your seat, and could I ask Gordon Hodge to come forward, please? Again, you'll have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds to go.
Can I just agree with everything David Bamford has said? I, as a planner, also give a different weighting to the judgment on the issues here, and this application should be refused. I should also just point out, I'm speaking on behalf of Mountaineering Scotland here. They would have been here today, but they're based in Perth. So everything I'm about to tell you is their view. Now, this is an iconic hill. It's one of the main hills in the Galloway Forest Park, which interestingly we're hearing in the wireless this morning, and correctly is going to become a national park. But this kind of behaviour by developers has to be stopped. We've a duty to protect our landscape and heritage. And this is a flagrant breach of the Planning Act by these people. And this should be refused and enforcement action taken within 28 days to clear up this mess. Now, the point has been made, you can feel relaxed because it's going away in June 2018. No. The point is, we need to get this cleared up now. The main walking season starts in March. And we need to hit the planting season for the damage that's been caused to the hillside by a tracked vehicle or whatever. And the whole thing cleared up within a month. And so that when I drive up there just now and I pass the Greenwell and I see all these people's cars, people parking their cars to go up there to see all this clutter, it's embarrassing that as a council or a region we've allowed this to happen. So we've got to send out the signal that this behaviour will not be tolerated by developers. And if you don't reject it, that's exactly the signal will be set out. This is a soft touch for developers. So there are other solutions. They can hand out mobile satellite phones. Get on with it. Thank you. Any questions? Quite happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. Has any members got any questions for Mr. Hodge?
Well, put it off.
No.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Right.
Okay, no questions, Mr.
Right,
Hodge.
sorry,
Please take your seat. Okay, members are now in session. Katie first and then Archie.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of queries, really. I mean, we have in 4.7, it does state that currently we're not designated at a national level, the cairns for protection, but it does say that the summit area has been designated as an archaeological zone for the purpose of LDP. Can I just confirm, I've got a couple of questions. The first one, is that LDP as it currently stands, or is that in our proposed development plan for the future LDP2? My other question is, are there any legal ways that we can enforce that the cairns are actually put back as they were? You know, you made comment that it was difficult enough to actually find out who had actually placed the trailer there. What are the legal ways forward that we could pursue this to enforce that actually the area is put back to how it should be? Thank you.
Okay, Bill.
In answer to your first question, yes, the designation as an archaeological zone is under the current local development plan, so therefore for policy reasons it is protected at a local level. On your second point, as you described, the legal position, if approval is granted, it will be subject to conditions requiring reinstatement, so therefore there is an obligation on the developer to comply with that condition. So that is the that is the enforcement powers we would have. It would be in terms of compliance with that condition. Clearly we're in a different position now than we were at the outset in August last year when we didn't know who the developer was. The developer has made the application, acknowledged that planning permission is required, and therefore we would be in a position to deal with them and enforce against them if necessary.
You want to come back in, Kate?
Yeah, that's great, and that confirms the legal position if the planning application is approved subject to the conditions. If the planning application is not approved and it's refused here today by this committee, do we have any legal ways to enforce the developer to put the site back to how it was originally?
Yes, there would be adequate enforcement powers in the Planning Act to take enforcement action against the developer, well indeed the landowner and the developer, and we could require complete reinstatement in the same way as required by the recommended condition.
Okay, Archie.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I have a lot of sympathy with the objectors on this one, mainly because it's already been up there for 2 years anyway. A lot of the information that should have been gathered would have been gathered, and I do actually think that there is an adverse material impact on the local environment. As was suggested, there are a lot of walkers that actually go up in that particular area. And on that point, because of the adverse material impact to the local environment, I would propose that we reject this application and ask for the development to be removed from site as quickly as possible, and the cairns returned to their natural positions.
Thank you, Archie. David, you want to say something?
Chair, yes, if I can just draw members' attention to paragraph 410 in particular. It's not for gathering information. This is to provide telecommunications as part of the spend proposal. So there's a health and safety justification, which is why, on balance, Billy has given the recommendation to support it here. In terms of enforcement, as I'm sure the representatives are aware, it is not something that you could do in 28 days. You would have to serve a Section 272 notice first, giving 28 days to establish the ownership. You would then have to serve an enforcement notice giving a reasonable period of time, which I would suggest would be about 3 months in this instance, plus the lead-in period, plus the opportunity for them to appeal, which all in all would take you to June anyway. So whilst we did look at it as an option for refuse and enforce, we've taken a pragmatic stance here that if it's going to be gone by the end of June, it actually is just as quick and saves an awful lot of time and effort and cost to the council by going through an appeal process to actually trust them. And if they do not remove it, as they say they would by the end of June, that's where the instance would be appropriate to take enforcement action, would be actually holding them for what they have said. So for that reason, we have supported it. That I think it's a pragmatic solution, given that they would be removing it by the end of June.
Just coming back on that particular point then, Chair, if it's a health and safety reason, then why are they getting rid of it in June 2018? You know, if it's going to be there for, it may mean that there's a future application coming forward for another site or whatever, but if it's there for health and safety reasons, it's been there for 2 years, what happens once it's gone?
Well, again, Chair, if I can point out 410, it's for the construction of the overhead power lines in connection with Blackcraig and Margree wind farms. Once the construction is finished, there's no longer a need for it, so they will be removing it. It's not like an ongoing transmitter station that's required.
Come back on that then, Chair. I mean, just listen to what David says and I'll take his advice, you know, and obviously, if it's going to take till June anyway, then what's the point?
Dougie Campbell.
Thanks, Chair. I'm mindful that you know, we shouldn't be seen to be handing out any form of punishment because the application is retrospective. But you know, there has been a flagrant disregard for planning law here. I think it's very disappointing that the applicant isn't here to answer members' questions, because I'm sure there would be many questions forthcoming. I have a strong inclination to refuse this application on the grounds that have already been highlighted, and that would be my motion.
Thank you, Dougie. Andrew?
Chair, I would like to propose an amendment that we go with the recommendations, as we're not a punitive committee, and also if it is going to be June before they can practically get this down, then it would just be a waste of council resources to pursue this.
Okay, we've got a motion to refuse an amendment to accept the recommendations. Dougie, have you got a seconder? John? Second from John Young. Do you have a seconder for the amendment? Elaine?
Yeah, because I'm prepared to second Andrew's amendment. However, I do think we need to put a signal out. I mean, for all the reasons you've said, that actually it's not going to make any difference whether we turn it down or whether we accept it in terms of the amount of time that the structure is there. However, I do think that we need to get a message out that we do take a bit of a dim view on retrospective planning applications, and that in future we would not expect to see this sort of thing happening again.
Okay, Jeff, you got a counter amendment?
No, I just want clarification. I mean, I think the developers have been very high-handed about this, just sort of dragging this equipment up to the top of the hill, and we've heard there could have been damage to the landscape, and presumably come June, if this goes ahead, they'll then drag it back off the hill again. So possibly as an indication of our displeasure, we say that they have to arrange for it to be airlifted off the hill. It's their expense at the end of the day, but we shouldn't allow them to do any further damage to the landscape.
Yeah, thank you. I think we'll have to deal with this. We've got a motion and an amendment. Well, debate should really be stopped, Katie, until we go through the... No, I think we'll go to the vote. Nick, can you just highlight that, please? Before we go to the vote, Dougie, we'll need clarification for the refusal.
Thanks, Chair. The reason for the refusal is on the basis that the damage to the archaeology on the summit of the hill and the overall effect that it has on the views on that particular site, which is of considerable importance to the scenic nature of the region.
David will just come in and see if that's competent.
Chair, as well, could I draw attention, if you are minded to go for that, then on page 40 in the report, you do have mentioned that there's a degree of conflict with policies OP1C, OP2 and NE2, and then paragraph 4.8 about OP1B and HE3. So I would suggest that's the basis on which you would be putting forward a reason for refusal. And that's the policy grounds, and then we can take on board the other words that you've said about the effect on the impact of the landscape and also the archaeology.
You happy with that, do you?
Yes, I am. Couldn't have put it better. Thanks.
Okay. Do you want to just read out the...
Okay, so we have a motion moved and seconded to refuse. The reasons being for damage to the archaeology on the site, the effect upon views, and the conflict with the policies that Mr. Sutty's just outlined that are contained in the report on page 40. And we have an amendment proposed by Councillor Giusti, seconded by Councillor Murray, to approve the application as per the recommendation and conditions stated within the report.
Ian?
Sorry, can I have a point of information? There was a mention earlier from the leader about putting a condition in. If we go to the vote now and either approve or refuse, if we approve it without any possibility of that condition. So I think that really has to be investigated just now.
Well, just to be clear, obviously you'd be approving as per the report, which has two conditions, one of which is the removal and the other one is to do with the restoration of the site, including the cairn. So that's what's recommended in the report. I don't think you'll be able to do anything else reasonably in planning terms, such as requiring its airlifting off or anything like that. I don't think that would be reasonable, proportionate to attach that condition.
You happy with that, Ian? Okay.
Sorry, Chairs, but could I clarify when you've said refuse, is that refuse and enforce? Because you could just refuse it and then decide not to carry out any enforcement action and just rely on them removing it from the site themselves.
Dookie? Refuse and enforce?
Yep, I'm happy with that.
Yes, David?
Just based on what David said there, I've been kind of thinking about that as well. Could we put the condition, obviously we refuse application, but rather than go through all that process that you were talking about, put the condition on that site will be back to what it should be by the end of June, on the date stated in here.
If you approve an application, you can attach conditions, but if you refuse an application, that's it. You've just refused the development wholesale. The only way you could require restoration would be through the serving of an enforcement notice.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the vote now.
Okay. Councillor John Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Doogie Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn. Councillor Giusti.
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman.
Motion.
Councillor James is not present. Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Murray.
Amendment.
And Councillor Young.
Motion.
So that's 6 members voting in favour of the motion and 5 voting in favour of the amendment, meaning the motion is carried for refusal and enforcement.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, we'll now move on to item number 7, which is Barncrosh Farm, Castle Douglas, planning application for change of use of agricultural land for the siting of 444 bases and holiday lodges, alterations and extensions to existing buildings to form reception, shop, cafe and leisure facilities, including pool and sauna, change of use of farmhouse to form a bar, restaurant and staff accommodation, installation of full drainage system, LPG compound, landscaping improvements to the site, access and associated works without compliance with condition 1 of planning permission, which was 13/2/0361 to cater for a different layout, which is now planning number 17/1800/full. And Andrew Robinson will give his presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application has been submitted under the provisions of Section 42 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act, seeking non-compliance with a condition that was attached to a previously approved planning permission. And the application site is in 2 parts, and it's situated on the northern side of the A75 to the southwest of Bridge of Dee. And this is the road that leads down to Kirkcudbright. The main part of the site is situated around Barncrosh Farm, which is an established self-catering tourist accommodation. And the second part of the site is on the eastern side of a classified road leading off the A75, which contains a fishing pond and open pastoral land. The planning permission, which was approved in September 2014, which was for the development of a leisure park comprising tourist accommodation. And this was the site layout that accompanied that planning application. This application was submitted prior to this application expiring, and what the proposal seeks is effectively to accommodate within one of the conditions a slightly altered layout, which is emphasised on the plan here. So removal of what was lodges in this area to make that a recreational area, and basically relocated them in these areas here. Also, this application is seeking to develop the site in a phased approach, which is also emphasised here. So you've got phase 1 in this area, phase 2 here, phase 3 and phase 4. And the site itself is really just away from the tourist accommodation, is just open pastoral land. So this is looking from the access to the site, and again further up into the site access. So in conclusion of this application, which has been referred to you because it relates to a major development, officers consider the request to seek non-compliance with the previous condition is acceptable, which would allow for a slightly revised layout and the option to develop the site in phases. So the application is recommended for approval subject to similar conditions previously attached, but with the slight change to condition 1 to accommodate the request that's been made. Also, as part of this application, there's been an additional condition attached, which is condition 8, which was at the request of the roads officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any members got any questions for the presentation? David?
Just the reciting of these 12 caravans, are you comfortable that the space between them and the ones behind or in front of them, whatever, is sufficient? Because they're filling in a kind of area of open space to a certain extent. Just wonder if you think that that's acceptable.
That's an issue that's actually falls under environmental standards remit, because they need to apply for a site licence. So the siting, it's actually specified as minimum dimensions in legislation that's covered by environmental standards. They have to have minimum separation distances. So it's really a situation that would be covered but out with the planning process as part of their site licence.
Are you happy with that, Joe? Dougie?
I wouldn't say I was happy, but it's something you just have to accept, isn't it?
Dougie?
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions, please. First question is there any indication in terms of the timescale for completion of the various phases? Because I'm mindful of the disruption, particularly in A75, during this process. And also, I may have missed it in the papers, but would the upgrade to the entry from the A75 to the site be carried out before the work actually on building, constructing the site takes place? I'm just mindful of the increase in volume and vehicles at that particular location, which there's a fast-moving road at that point. Thanks.
I think your request would actually be covered by criterion F, which is within condition 1, which actually requires the proposed sequential phasing of the development, so details of that to be submitted, and that includes all internal roads, waste collection facilities, junction alterations and improvements to the A75, so it's actually covered as part of the condition for those details to be submitted.
Okay, no more questions for the presentation. Members are now in session. Archie?
I remember this one coming in 2013, and there was a lot of discussion about the junction on the A75, as Dougie quite rightly raises again, and I think that's important to keep that in the conditions as well. We just had a seminar yesterday for Visit Scotland about making sure families have a good experience when they come to Dumfries and Galloway, and I think this is an opportunity again for showing that any visitors or any developers at Dumfries and Galloway is open for business. So I'm quite happy with the recommendations you, Chair, that are in the report.
Thank you, Archie. No more questions? David?
My question is about the nature of these holiday lodges. I mean, I may have missed it, but did we see pictures of what a holiday lodge should look like there?
It doesn't really fall within the scope of this application because as under an application for section 42, which is, I've explained a little bit in the report, the procedure, we can only consider the conditions, the request to alter the condition that's been applied for. We can't reconsider the principle of the development. So all we're assessing in this application is what's been applied for.
Yes, thank you for that. It was just that I'd read sort of full application. I assumed that's the not detailed planning then, or is that already in place? And does that then show the nature of these buildings?
It is a full application because applications for section 42 are classed as that, but also from what you're saying is actually they're caravans, so it falls under the definition of a caravan, the lodges. I think that's explains paragraph 1.3, criterion 1.
It just seems quite a commitment, 144 things that we've no idea what they look like. It's, you know, whereas we look at a single building and, you know, we like to have a good look at what its impact might be, and yet here we potentially have 444 of them, and it's open season as to what they should be. Yeah.
It was something that was assessed as part of the other applications, so the principle of that has already been established. As I say, it's the nature of this type of application is seeking a non-compliance with the conditions previously attached, and effectively for the revised layout and to stipulate a phased approach, and that's really all we can assess as part of this application, and whether that changing the condition 1 to incorporate that request is acceptable.
If there's no more questions, we'll go to the officer's recommendations. Agreed? We're now on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is White Oaks, Georgetown Village, Georgetown, Dumfries, planning application for alterations and change of use of domestic garage stroke store to form a dwelling house, and planning number is 17/1807/4. And here to give a presentation is Torrell Glendon.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So we've got an application for the alteration and change of use of a garage to form dwelling house at White Oaks in Georgetown. This is the location plan showing the application site outlined in red. It's located within Georgetown Village, which is a small building group characterised by linear development along the U108 road. The site is located to the northern edge of Georgetown Village, and just as a brief history to the site, the dwelling house White Oaks was first granted planning permission back in May 2000. That also included the approval for the garage, and a standard condition was applied to ensure that the garage was used for domestic purposes only. Since that approval, a non-material variation was approved to change the pitch of the roof, and an amendment to building warrant was submitted in 2004, which unusually showed the garage constructed to a specification suggesting a use beyond a garage because it had cavity walls, double glazed windows and roof trusses suitable for a loft conversion. Clarification was then sought on the proposed use. However, no application was submitted and the building was finished as per the amended building warrant drawings. An application was then submitted in 2006 for the change of use of the garage to form dwelling house, but was refused by Planning Committee in August 2007. Another application was submitted in 2017 for the same proposal, however included an extension this time that was subsequently refused under delegated powers in April 2017. Here you see the block plan. It shows the proposed subdivision of the existing garden curtilage, and it's got the current garage, proposed dwelling house outlined in red. Here are the existing elevations and the existing floor plan and section. Here are the proposed elevations and the alterations that would mainly be seen are to windows and door openings mainly, also introduction of a slight roof overhang. Otherwise it remains mainly unchanged. And the proposed floor plan. Here you can see the garage from looking towards northwest. You've got the neighbouring dwelling at Heston House and the host dwelling, or which it currently is in the curtilage of White Oaks. This is the view from within the site, looking northeast and looking east. And here's the view looking north and looking northeast. And looking north, showing the current access. And a view looking south, showing the access again. And again looking south. So the application is recommended for refusal on the grounds that the location of the proposed dwelling would fail to conform with the established character and pattern of development on the east side of Georgetown Village small building group and introduces an inappropriate backland development contrary to policy H3, OP2 and associated supplementary guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Toril. Has any members got any questions for the presentation? Katie?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a point of clarity. On your photograph, you've marked existing outhouse. Is that the garage? It's just, okay, thank you. It's just to clarify the naming of. Thank you.
Elaine?
Thank you, Chair. I'd asked for this to be taken to the Planning Committee mainly because the applicant and their agent wanted to make their case to the committee. Unfortunately, because there are no objectors, they haven't actually had the opportunity to come to the committee to make their case. They have asked whether or not the committee would, or they have requested that the committee consider a site visit, so they're able to do that. So I was going to put that on the table to see whether the committee would be prepared to visit the site and actually observe it.
I'd be happy to second.
Okay.
Chair, can I move that we don't hold a site visit?
The questions was really on the presentation at the moment, but if we want to move into session, and do you want to put that forward, Elaine? Is that okay with members? Please, yeah. So Elaine's putting forward a motion for a site visit, and we've got a seconder, Archie. Davy McKee, you want to put an amendment?
Move an amendment that we don't hold a site visit and make a decision today.
Have we got a seconder for Dougie Campbell? So we have an amendment from Davy McKee, seconded by Dougie Campbell. Do you want to just... Okay, Nick.
Okay. Councillor John Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Doogie Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Giusti.
Motion.
Councillor Hagman.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Lever.
Amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Murray.
Motion.
Can I vote on this, please?
Apologies, Councillor Young.
Okay, thank you. Amendment.
We have 6 members voting in favour of the motion and 6 members voting in favour of the amendment. So it's over to you, Chair.
Yeah, well, I've got the casting vote, so amendment.
So that's, so the amendment is carried and that's no site visit and for the matter to be considered today.
Okay, has anybody got any questions or further questions for debate on this? No? Well, got the recommendations of refuse? Agreed? Well, thank you very much, everyone.